Chris Voss is a former FBI hostage negotiator who spent over 2 decades dealing with some of the world's most intense, high-stakes situations, from kidnappings in the Philippines to bank robberies in Brooklyn. After retiring from the FBI, he transitioned into business, teaching negotiation skills to executives and companies through his firm, the Black Swan Group. Never split. The difference is based on the idea that traditional negotiation strategies, like logic, reason, or splitting the difference, are outdated and ineffective in high-stakes scenarios. Instead, Voss introduces a new, psychologically driven approach rooted in real-world crisis negotiation tactics. His methods aim to give the reader a distinct advantage in everyday negotiations, from salary talks to buying a car or closing business deals. In the introduction, Voss explains that negotiation is not about winning through compromise, but about using emotional intelligence, empathy, and subtle psychological tactics to guide conversations and influence outcomes. He contrasts FBI-style negotiation with the rigid Harvard-style negotiation approach, arguing that the former is more adaptable, human, and ultimately more effective in real life. Voss introduces the concept that no deal is better than a bad deal, emphasizing that compromise can often leave both sides unsatisfied. His core belief is, never split the difference. Instead, he teaches how to uncover hidden truths, the black swans, control conversations, and influence outcomes with confidence and skill. Chapter 1. The New Rules. How to Become the Smartest Person. In any room. In the opening chapter of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss introduces a groundbreaking shift in how negotiation is understood and practiced. Moving away from traditional academic and theoretical approaches, Voss draws from his real-life experiences as an FBI hostage negotiator to demonstrate that negotiation is not just a logical or mathematical process, it is deeply human, emotional, and psychological. This chapter lays the groundwork for a new philosophy rooted in tactical empathy, emotional intelligence, and behavioral insight. Voss opens by challenging the status quo, particularly the classic negotiation methods taught at elite institutions like Harvard. He points out that while academic models emphasize logic and structured problem-solving, real-world negotiations are unpredictable and messy. People are driven more by emotion than reason, and recognizing this is the first step to mastering the art of negotiation. The myth of rationality. Traditional negotiation theory, especially the Harvard Negotiation Project's model, is based on the idea that both parties can achieve a win-win outcome through rational compromise. This model assumes that both sides are calm, logical, and willing to make mutual concessions. But Voss, with decades of high-stakes experience, reveals that this is far from how negotiations unfold. Whether it's a terrorist holding hostages or a CEO defending their company's interests, people are influenced by fear, pride, anger, ego, and uncertainty. He references the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who showed that humans make decisions based on emotion far more often than logic. We are irrational creatures who rationalize our emotional decisions after the fact. Therefore, attempting to negotiate with pure reason is ineffective and naive. Negotiation is communication with purpose. According to Voss, negotiation is fundamentally about clear, focused communication. But more than that, it's about influencing another person's behavior. Whether negotiating a salary, a real estate deal, or the release of hostages, your goal is the same. Change what the other person believes is possible and steer them toward your preferred outcome. This requires more than a command of facts or logical arguments. It requires understanding the human psyche, how people think, react, and feel in moments of pressure and uncertainty. This is why tactical empathy becomes so critical. It's the ability to recognize the perspective and emotions of your counterpart and use that understanding to guide the negotiation. Tactical empathy. The cornerstone of Voss's method. Tactical empathy is not about agreement or sympathy. It's about acknowledgement. It's the active, intentional process of understanding the feelings and mindset of another, and then verbalizing that understanding to build trust. When you articulate what the other person is experiencing, they feel seen and heard, which lowers their guard and opens the door to collaboration. Voss emphasizes that people want to be understood and accepted, By labeling their emotions, using phrases like, "it seems like," or "it sounds like," you validate their experience without conceding your position. This builds rapport and lays the emotional groundwork for more productive negotiations. Mirroring, a simple yet powerful technique. One of the most effective tools in Voss's negotiation arsenal is mirroring, repeating the last few words your counterpart says. It sounds deceptively simple, but it has powerful psychological effects. Mirroring makes the other person feel heard and encourages them to elaborate, giving you more information and deeper insight. For example, if someone says, "We can't go any lower on price," you might respond, "Can't go any lower?" This often prompts them to explain their reasoning or reveal more details about their position, which you can use to your advantage. Mirroring works because it's non-threatening and invites the other party to keep talking. It's beneficial when the conversation is stalling or becoming tense. The more your counterpart talks, the more opportunities you have to influence the direction of the negotiation. Labeling emotions to build connection. Labeling is another essential technique that involves identifying and naming the emotions your counterpart is experiencing. Phrases like, "It seems like you're worried about," or "It sounds like this is important to you," aren't confrontational and create a sense of connection. Voss explains that labeling helps diffuse negative emotions and reinforce positive ones. When you name a negative emotion, it often loses intensity because the other person feels understood. Conversely, when you label a positive emotion, it becomes more salient, strengthening the bond between parties. He notes that labeling is particularly powerful in high-stakes scenarios. During hostage negotiations, simply acknowledging a kidnapper's fear can shift the emotional dynamic and open up space for resolution. The same principles apply in business. When clients feel you're aware of their concerns, they're more likely to trust you. Mastering no. Instead of chasing yes, most amateur negotiators seek a quick yes as a sign of progress. But Voss warns that premature agreement can be misleading. People often say yes to avoid conflict or to end a conversation, not because they truly agree. Instead, Voss encourages negotiators to embrace and even welcome the word no. When someone says no, they feel safe, in control, and unthreatened. It's a boundary-setting word that gives them room to think. Rather than being a rejection, no is often the start of a real negotiation. By triggering a no, you can uncover hidden objections and begin a more honest dialogue. For example, instead of asking, "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" which pushes for a yes, ask, "Is now a bad time to talk?" This invites a no response that still leads to engagement. The power of calibrated questions. Another technique introduced in Chapter 1 is calibrated questions, open-ended inquiries designed to make the counterpart think and respond more thoughtfully. Questions that begin with how or what are particularly effective because they can't be answered with a simple yes or no. Examples: how am I supposed to do that? What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now? How does this affect your bottom line? These questions achieve several goals. First, they force the counterpart to consider your perspective. Second, they often reveal valuable information. And third, they help you regain control of the conversation without being confrontational. Creating the illusion of control. One of Voss's core principles is that people want to feel in control. By using the above techniques, calibrated questions, labeling, and mirroring, you give the counterpart the illusion of control while quietly guiding the direction of the negotiation. This illusion helps disarm defensive behavior and creates a sense of autonomy in the other party. People who feel in control are more likely to cooperate and less likely to resist. Voss likens this to steering a boat from below deck. You're not visibly commanding the wheel, but influencing the course. The Harvard negotiation exercise. A test case. Voss describes an exercise he conducted with Harvard Law School students trained in traditional negotiation tactics. Despite their academic background, the students were at a loss when Voss used his real-world techniques. He could control the negotiation flow without demanding by mirroring, labeling, and using calibrated questions. His demonstration showed that while traditional strategies look good on paper, they often crumble in the face of more emotionally attuned methods. Never split the difference. The Philosophy and Practice. The book's title encapsulates Voss's entire philosophy. Splitting the difference is a lazy shortcut that leads to mediocrity. It often means giving up something valuable in exchange for avoiding conflict. However, when managed well, conflict leads to innovation, better solutions, and stronger agreements. Voss argues that you should never settle for a 50-50 compromise to make a deal. Instead, pursue the full outcome you need while being empathetic, strategic, and aware of the human emotions driving the negotiation. Conclusion: setting the stage for mastery. Chapter 1 powerfully invites you to rethink everything you know about negotiation. Voss dismantles the outdated idea that rationality is king and replaces it with a human-centered approach built on tactical empathy, behavioral psychology, and strategic communication. Through real-world examples, psychological insights, and actionable techniques, Voss begins to lay out a framework that any reader, whether in law enforcement, sales, business, or everyday life, can adopt to become a more effective negotiator. The key message: negotiation is not a battle of logic, but a dance of emotions, and those who learn to lead that dance will always come out ahead. Chapter 2: Be a Mirror: How to Quickly Establish Rapport. In Chapter 2 of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss delves into one of the most critical elements in negotiation: rapport. Unlike traditional views that consider rapport something nice but not essential, Voss argues that rapport is the foundation upon which every successful negotiation is built. He introduces mirroring, labeling, tone control, and strategic silence as the primary tools for quickly establishing trust and connection with your counterpart. This chapter is about mastering the subtle psychological tools that immediately put others at ease and create a cooperative dynamic. It's not about being charming or friendly for its own sake. It's about creating an environment where the other person wants to work with you. Mirroring, a tool for instant connection. Voss begins by explaining mirroring. Unlike the common misunderstanding that mirroring involves mimicking someone's body language, Voss uses the term to refer to repeating the last 3 to 5 words, or a selected few, that your counterpart just said. This simple technique prompts the other person to keep talking and revealing more information while subconsciously feeling heard and respected. The technique is effective because it appeals to a deep psychological need, the desire to feel understood. Mirroring triggers a brain response that makes people more comfortable and open. It's the conversational equivalent of leaning in and saying, "I'm listening." The neuroscience behind mirroring Voss cites neuroscience research indicating that when someone feels listened to, their brain produces oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This leads to a greater sense of safety and collaboration. Mirroring activates this process without triggering defensiveness, making it ideal for tense or high-stakes conversations. Interestingly, the simplicity of mirroring is part of what makes it so effective. You're not trying to outwit or overpower the other person. You're merely holding up a gentle verbal mirror and inviting them to continue. In doing so, you begin to guide the interaction in a way that favors connection and collaboration. A real-world example: the international kidnapping Voss shares a real-life story about a kidnapping in the Philippines. During this negotiation, mirroring helped diffuse a dangerous situation. The technique encouraged the kidnapper to elaborate on his demands and motivations, giving Voss and his team the leverage needed to maneuver the conversation toward a peaceful resolution. The takeaway is profound. If mirroring can work in a life-or-death hostage situation, imagine what it can do in business negotiations, workplace conflicts, or even personal disagreements. It's a universal tool because it taps into universal human needs: to be heard, validated, and respected. Tone of voice. The secret weapon. Voss emphasizes that words alone are not enough. How you say something can be even more important than what you say. He introduces the concept of the late-night FM DJ voice, a calm, slow, and soothing tone that helps diffuse tension and create a sense of calm. This voice isn't just for effect. It changes how your words are received. A soft, slow voice encourages reflection and decreases defensiveness. It makes you seem composed, trustworthy, and in control. He also identifies 2 other types of tones. 1, positive, playful voice, friendly, warm, and encouraging. Use this the majority of the time. 2. Direct, assertive voice, used sparingly, as it can trigger resistance if not deployed carefully. Matching the right tone to the right moment is part of negotiation. Voss teaches that mastering tone allows you to influence emotions in the room without seeming manipulative or aggressive. The power of silence. Letting the other person think. Silence can be one of the most potent tools in negotiation, yet it's often underused. After you deliver a mirror, label, or question, Voss recommends pausing for at least 4 seconds. This silence puts subtle psychological pressure on the counterpart to fill the gap, often by revealing more information. In essence, silence says, "I'm comfortable. I'm listening. You go ahead." This strategic use of silence is particularly effective when paired with a calm tone. It suggests confidence and curiosity, inviting the other person to engage more deeply. Labeling revisited, naming emotions to gain trust. While labeling was introduced in Chapter 1, Voss revisits it here as a companion to mirroring. Where mirroring is about encouraging dialogue, labeling is about identifying what the other person is feeling. Phrases like, "It seems like you're feeling," "It sounds like you're frustrated by," "It looks like you're concerned about." These phrases accomplish 2 things. 1. They validate the other person's emotions, building trust. 2. They help surface hidden dynamics that might otherwise sabotage the negotiation. Labeling allows you to guide the emotional direction of the conversation. For example, labeling fear helps neutralize it, while labeling excitement amplifies it. Either way, you're using empathy as a strategic advantage. The 3 voice tones, in depth. Let's take a closer look at the 3 tones Voss recommends. 1. The late-night FM DJ voice. Calm and slow. Projects confidence and composure, useful in moments of tension or escalation. 2. The positive, playful voice, your default tone. Projects friendliness and warmth, helps establish rapport and reduce resistance. 3. The assertive voice. Use sparingly, can come across as aggressive if overused, may be needed in rare moments of establishing authority. Choosing the right tone can determine whether your words are accepted or rejected. Often, it's not the message, but the delivery that changes the outcome. Voss emphasizes that tactical empathy is not about feeling sorry for the other person or even agreeing with them. It's about understanding what drives them emotionally and using that understanding to shape your approach. For instance, if a counterpart is angry because they feel disrespected, recognizing and acknowledging that anger can help you redirect it. You're not agreeing with their viewpoint, acknowledging their experience, which earns their attention and potentially their cooperation. This is critical because people don't make decisions in a vacuum. Emotions are always present. If you ignore them, you do so at your peril. If you acknowledge and use them, you gain a potent edge. How to use mirroring and labeling together. Here's a simple structure for using mirroring and labeling in tandem. 1. Mirror a phrase the other person just used. 2. Wait for them to elaborate. 3. Label the emotion they've just revealed. 4. Follow up with a calibrated question. How, what? Example. Them. We're just not sure this deal makes sense for us right now. You. Doesn't make sense right now? Mirror. Them. Yeah, the numbers just aren't aligning. You. It sounds like you're concerned about the budget. Label. Them. Exactly. Our Q4 expenses are tight. You. What does your ideal budget solution look like? Calibrated question. You've created clarity, empathy, and cooperation in just a few exchanges, all without pushing or pressuring. A case study, business deal. Gone cold. Voss shares an example involving a stalled business deal. Using mirroring and labeling, he re-engages the other party by demonstrating understanding rather than pushing for commitment. The client, who had avoided contact, shares their internal concerns, allowing the negotiation to proceed. This shows that mirroring and labeling are not just for hostile situations. They work equally well in commercial and everyday interactions. Focusing on understanding rather than persuasion creates a much more effective form of influence, mastering the small moments. One of the key insights in this chapter is that negotiation success often hinges on mastering small conversational moments. These are the micro-interactions where trust is built, information is exchanged, and positions are clarified. Using a calm tone, pausing at the right moment, and repeating a few key words are not flashy tactics, but they are incredibly effective. Over time, they compound into strong relationships and better outcomes. Conclusion: rapport is power. Chapter 2 cements the idea that rapport is not just a soft skill, it's a strategic necessity. Through mirroring, labeling, tone control, and silence, you can quickly create a sense of trust and safety that paves the way for successful negotiation. The tools discussed are simple yet powerful, grounded in psychology, and tested in some of the most extreme scenarios imaginable. Whether negotiating with a terrorist or a client, these techniques help you become the calm, confident presence others want to follow. In Voss's world, the best negotiators aren't the most aggressive, but the most empathetic. They listen deeply, speak gently, and ask thoughtful questions. They build rapport quickly, not by trying to win every point, but by making the other person feel seen and heard. And it all starts with one word: mirror. Chapter 3. Don't feel their pain. Label it. How to create trust with tactical empathy. In Chapter 3 of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss introduces the concept of tactical empathy. This core skill turns emotional intelligence into a tool for influencing outcomes in any negotiation. Traditional views often frame empathy as passive, a form of emotional identification with another person's feelings. But Voss redefines empathy as active, strategic, and tactical. It's not about sharing someone's emotions. It's about understanding their perspective and using that understanding to influence their decisions. This chapter emphasizes a critical distinction. Don't feel their pain. Label it. That subtle change turns empathy from passive to dynamic, a method of connection and persuasion. Tactical empathy versus sympathy, the crucial difference. One of Voss's first clarifications is between sympathy and tactical empathy. Sympathy is about feeling sorry for someone. It makes the situation about you. Tactical empathy, on the other hand, is about understanding how the other person sees the world and acknowledging their emotions without being overwhelmed by them. As Voss uses it, empathy is about demonstrating that you've heard and understood the other party. It's not about agreeing or compromising. It's about making the other person feel safe, respected, and engaged. That creates trust, and trust creates opportunity. The science of tactical empathy. Empathy engages the emotional brain, specifically the amygdala, which processes threats and emotional significance. When someone feels seen and understood, their brain begins to downshift from a defensive mode into a more cooperative state. This shift is essential for productive negotiations. Voss compares this to a hostage negotiation. If the other side sees you as an adversary, they'll resist. But if they begin to see you as a partner, someone who understands their fears and goals, they'll start to collaborate, even in high-stakes situations. Labeling, the bridge to empathy. The practical application of tactical empathy begins with labeling. Labeling involves identifying the emotions or dynamics at play and giving them a name. This might sound simple, but it has profound psychological effects. Examples of labeling phrases include, "It seems like you're worried about." "It sounds like you're under a lot of pressure." "It looks like you're concerned about how this will turn out." These phrases serve two purposes. 1, they validate the other person's emotions without judging them. 2, they diffuse negative emotions by bringing them into the open. Studies have shown that people experience lower emotional intensity when they name their feelings. That's why labeling is so powerful. It helps people move out of an emotional fog into a place where they can think more clearly. The magic of neutral labels. One of Voss's most effective tactics is to use neutral, non-judgmental language when labeling. You don't say, "You're angry." Instead, you say, "It seems like this situation is frustrating." This subtle phrasing makes the other person feel safe enough to confirm or correct your perception. Either way, you gain valuable information, and they begin to trust that you're genuinely trying to understand them. Voss stresses that labels don't always have to be right. When you get a label wrong, the correction you receive is still helpful because it moves the conversation forward. The goal is not to be perfect, but attentive and responsive. The role of observation. Tactical empathy requires sharp observational skills. Voss teaches negotiators to pay close attention to tone, body language, word choice, and pacing. These subtle signals often reveal more than words alone. For example, someone might say they're fine, but their voice is tight. Their arms are crossed, and they're avoiding eye contact. That's a sign of hidden tension. A label like, "It seems like something's still bothering you," can bring that unspoken feeling to the surface. The more observant you are, the more precisely you can apply empathy. And the more precisely you apply empathy, the more trust you build. Real-life example: the bank hostage crisis. One of Voss's most compelling stories in this chapter is about a bank robbery in Brooklyn that turned into a hostage situation. The criminal had taken multiple people captive and was refusing to cooperate. Voss's team used tactical empathy to connect with the robber. Instead of shouting demands or making threats, they acknowledged his fear and desperation. Phrases like, "It seems like you're scared things are spiraling out of control," helped the man feel understood, not judged. Over time, this approach softened the robber's resistance. He began to open up, and the situation ended without bloodshed. This is the power of labeling in action. It transforms high-stakes tension into cooperation, even in life-or-death moments. Labeling negative and positive emotions. Voss explains that labeling works for negative and positive emotions, but is especially powerful with negative ones. When you label a negative emotion, you help diffuse it, while when you label a positive one, you amplify it. Negative labeling. Examples: "It seems like you're frustrated with how things are going." "It sounds like this situation is causing much stress." Positive labeling examples: "It sounds like you're proud of your team." "It seems like you're excited about this opportunity." By strategically using both types, you can guide the emotional flow of the conversation. You validate concerns, but you also reinforce enthusiasm and optimism. Listening without a counterattack. One of the most complex parts of tactical empathy is listening without immediately offering a counterpoint. When someone says something you disagree with, the natural impulse is to argue. But Voss teaches that resisting this impulse is key to influence. Instead of debating, you acknowledge. You use labels to show that you hear the other side's perspective. This builds trust and lowers defenses. Once that's established, the other person becomes more open to your point of view. It's a paradox. The more you validate their perspective, the more they will consider yours. The accusation audit. Preempting objections. A powerful technique introduced in this chapter is the accusation audit. Before entering a difficult conversation, Voss recommends listing every negative thing the other side might think or say about you. Then, at the start of the conversation, you label those negatives yourself. "You probably think we're trying to pressure you." "It might seem like we haven't taken your concerns seriously." This disarms the other person by taking the sting out of their objections before they can voice them. It creates transparency and makes you seem fearless and honest, which builds immense trust. The accusation audit is especially effective in tense or competitive negotiations where suspicion runs high. By addressing the elephant in the room, you remove its power. Empathy and trust in business settings. While these techniques come from high-stakes crisis negotiation, Voss clarifies they're equally valuable in business. Whether dealing with a disgruntled client, a tough colleague, or a skeptical investor, tactical empathy builds the rapport necessary for progress. One example Voss gives is a corporate negotiation where labeling helped him uncover hidden concerns, stalling a deal. Once those concerns were acknowledged, not argued, the other party relaxed and moved forward together. Empathy is not agreement. Voss reiterates that empathy doesn't mean surrendering your position. You're not giving in or agreeing with the other side, you're simply showing that you understand them. This distinction is crucial because many people fear that showing empathy makes them weak. In reality, tactical empathy gives you the power to influence, connect, and lead. When the other party feels understood, they stop resisting and start cooperating. That's when real negotiation begins. Tactical empathy in everyday life. Voss expands the conversation by showing how these tools work with family, friends, co-workers, and even strangers in everyday situations. Whether resolving a conflict with a spouse or dealing with a complex customer service issue, tactical empathy gives you the upper hand. It makes people feel heard. It creates emotional safety. It opens the door to influence. Practical steps to use tactical empathy. 1. Observe the other person's behavior and emotions. 2. Label what you're noticing using neutral phrases. 3. Pause to let the label sink in. Don't rush to fill the silence. 4. Stay calm and warm. Your tone matters more than your words. 5. Follow up with calibrated questions, how or what, to deepen the conversation. Chapter 3 is a deep dive into the emotional side of negotiation, the side most people overlook or avoid. Voss shows that success doesn't come from logic alone, but from mastering the emotional landscape. Tactical empathy, built through labeling and observation, guides that landscape. It helps you see the hidden drivers of behavior. It enables you to earn trust and uncover the truth. It makes people want to work with you instead of against you. The power of this chapter lies in its simplicity. You don't need to be a psychologist to use tactical empathy. You need to listen deeply, observe, and label emotions honestly. When you do that, you transform every conversation and every negotiation into a pathway toward connection and success. Chapter 4. Beware yes. Master no. How to generate momentum and make it safe to reveal the real stakes. In Chapter 4 of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss dissects one of the most misunderstood words in negotiation, yes. Most people, he argues, are conditioned to believe that a yes is the ultimate goal in any talks. However, Voss flips this notion on its head. He asserts that an eager pursuit of yes can push people away, make them defensive, and force them to hide their true intentions. According to Voss, the real breakthrough comes when you master no. By allowing people to say no and welcoming that response, you lower their defenses, give them a sense of control, and open the door to genuine dialogue. This chapter delves deep into the psychology of agreement and refusal, and how understanding these dynamics can give you the upper hand in any negotiation. The problem with yes, it's a trap. In most sales training and business environments, yes is the golden standard. But Voss points out this can create manipulative, pressure-filled situations that backfire. People often say yes, not because they mean it, but because they want to. End the conversation. Avoid confrontation. Please the other person. Buy time. These false yeses lead to unmet expectations, broken deals, and stalled relationships. Voss identifies 3 types of yes. 1. Counterfeit yes. The person says it just to get rid of you or end the conversation. 2. Confirmation. Yes. A simple affirmation with no real commitment. 3. Commitment. Yes. The real deal. Genuine agreement backed by intention and action. Most people chase the first 2 without realizing it. The key is to stop chasing yes and create conditions where a real, committed yes can emerge naturally. No is not a rejection. It's the start of real negotiation. No has an undeservedly bad reputation. Most people interpret it as rejection, failure, or resistance. Voss challenges this mindset by showing how no is a decisive moment of safety and clarity. When someone says no, they feel protected, in control, respected. It gives them space to think, breathe, and engage more honestly. For negotiators, this is gold. It's not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of real negotiation. Voss shares that many successful negotiations begin after the first no. The turning point comes when the other party feels secure enough to express disagreement without fear of being steamrolled. Why people fear? Saying yes. People often resist saying yes because it can carry unseen commitments. It might mean, I'm on the hook for something. Voss explains that this fear stems from years of manipulation by yes chasers, salespeople, marketers, or even bosses who use yes to trap people into decisions. By contrast, when someone says no, they feel liberated and safe. That safety makes them more likely to stay in the conversation, explore options, and reveal the truth. How to invite no to build trust. Voss introduces specific techniques that intentionally seek a no. This flips the script, lowers tension, and builds trust. 1. Ask no-oriented questions. Instead of asking, "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" ask, "Is now a bad time?" Instead of saying, "Would you be interested in learning more?" say, "Would it be ridiculous for us to discuss this further?" These questions permit people to say no, paradoxically making them more likely to say yes in the long run. 2. Calibrate your approach. Avoid coming off as needy or pushy. Frame your questions and proposals in a way that makes the other person feel comfortable pushing back. For example, would it be a crazy idea if we considered, "Are you against exploring a few alternatives?" These softeners encourage dialogue instead of resistance. No creates a path to the real issues. One of the most powerful aspects of no is that it clears the clutter. Once the other side feels safe to reject, they start to open up about what they want, what they're afraid of. What's holding them back? Voss tells the story of a negotiation with a counterpart who kept dodging questions. Only after hearing a confident no did the other person relax and start sharing real objections. That transparency paved the way for a better deal. Voss explains that the truth is often hidden behind polite agreement. No strips away that politeness and reveals the authentic concerns and motives underneath, the psychological relief of saying no. From a psychological perspective, saying no activates a sense of autonomy and agency. People feel they're in control, which is crucial in any negotiation. No gives people relief from pressure, a pause to reflect, permission to think clearly. Once they've said no, they feel stronger, and that strength often makes them more open to a solution that benefits both parties. Using no to gain the upper hand. Rather than chasing agreement, Voss teaches negotiators to use no as a strategic checkpoint. Here's how it works. Allow the other side to say no early. Listen closely to their reasoning. Use their objections to pivot and refine your approach. Ask calibrated questions that reframe the situation. This method positions you as a respectful partner, not an adversary. You build momentum not by pushing, but by creating a safe space for honesty. Reversing the yes ladder. In many sales environments, people are taught to build a yes ladder, a series of small yeses designed to lead to a big one. Voss turns this upside down by suggesting a no-driven approach. Instead of, "Do you like saving money?" "Would you want to make more time for your team?" he suggests, "Would it be a bad idea to save some money this quarter?" "Is it a ridiculous idea to make your team more efficient?" These questions disarm the listener. They're not being pressured. They're being given room to think. Saying no. Yourself, a negotiator's power. Move. This chapter also empowers you to say no. Voss emphasizes that negotiators must be comfortable rejecting offers that don't serve their interests. Saying no is a powerful signal. It sets clear boundaries. It forces the other side to reconsider and improve their proposal. It demonstrates confidence. Voss recommends one key phrase. "I'm sorry, but that doesn't work for me." It's polite, clear, and firm. How no drives real collaboration. No removes the performance layer from negotiation. Once both sides understand that rejection is part of the process, they can collaborate more honestly. Negotiation becomes a creative, problem-solving exercise when people stop trying to manipulate and start seeking clarity. It's not about beating the other side. It's about understanding their needs and working toward solutions that make sense for both parties. Tactical applications in everyday life. Voss encourages readers to practice the no mindset in daily conversations. Try using it in sales calls, with coworkers or employees, in customer service situations, with family or friends. Instead of forcing agreements, invite refusal. Watch how people relax, open up, and become more honest. This mindset shift, from chasing yes to mastering no, can improve every relationship you have. Practical techniques. Recap. 1. Ask no-based questions. Make the other party's decline safe. 2. Reframe pressure. Remove the fear of commitment from your approach. 3. Use calibrated no phrases. Invite objections to learn more. 4. Say no confidently. Set boundaries without apology. 5. Expect honesty after no. Use it as a gateway to deeper dialogue. Chapter 4 of Never Split. The difference teaches a powerful counterintuitive truth. Chasing yes can kill a deal, but embracing no can save it. By making it safe for others to say no, and being willing to say no yourself, you build authentic conversations grounded in trust and respect. That authenticity leads to better outcomes, deeper collaboration, and more lasting agreements. In a world that pushes us to seek constant affirmation, Voss offers a refreshing alternative. Give people the freedom to say no. In that freedom lies the real power of negotiation. Chapter 5. Trigger the 2 words that immediately transform any negotiation. Chapter 5 of Never Split. The difference revolves around a deceptively simple yet potent tool in negotiation, getting the other party to say the 2 words, "That's right." According to Chris Voss, these words represent a moment of complete alignment, mutual understanding, and emotional resonance. When someone says, "That's right," it signals that they feel heard, seen, and validated, and it marks a turning point where real progress can begin. In this chapter, Voss draws from real-life FBI negotiation experiences, psychological insights, and practical tools to explain why "that's right" is far more effective than getting someone to say, "You're right." The goal is not to win an argument or force agreement, but to build genuine rapport, create trust, and open the door to collaboration. Why "you're right" is dangerous. Before diving into "that's right," Voss takes time to explain the deceptive danger of the phrase, "you're right." While it might seem like a form of agreement, "you're right" is often just a polite dismissal. People say it to end a conversation, appease the other person, avoid conflict. "You're right" means the other person is not emotionally invested. They're surrendering, not agreeing. That's why hearing "you're right" in negotiation should be a red flag. It signals that your counterpart wants out, not in. That's right. The moment of breakthrough. In contrast, "that's right" is the golden moment. When someone says "that's right," they're not just agreeing with your facts, but with your understanding of their perspective. It reflects a robust psychological response. They feel understood. They feel affirmed. They feel safe. This emotional alignment opens the door to deeper trust and negotiation breakthroughs. According to Voss, the path to "that's right" is a strategic goal in any serious conversation. How to get to "that's right." So, how do you guide someone towards saying "that's right"? The key is tactical empathy, the deliberate act of identifying, understanding, and articulating the other person's emotions, needs, fears, and desires. 1. Use summary to mirror their reality. One of the most effective techniques for reaching "that's right" is the summary. A good summary doesn't just repeat words, it distills the emotional essence of the other person's point of view. A powerful summary might sound like, "It seems like you've been carrying a lot of stress trying to make this project work, and you haven't gotten much recognition. It sounds like you feel like no one has listened to your concerns, even though you've been raising them for weeks." When you reflect someone's reality accurately and compassionately, they are almost compelled to respond with, "That's right." 2. Labeling emotions. Labeling is another path to "that's right." When you put a name to the emotions the other person is experiencing, you signal that you understand more than just their words. You get their feelings. Phrases like, "It seems like you're feeling overlooked." "It sounds like you're worried about how this will affect your team." "It looks like you don't feel like this is a fair deal." These labels often lead people to validate your insight with, "That's right." Real FBI negotiation. Example, the power of the summary. Voss shares a gripping example from his time as an FBI hostage negotiator. In one case, a distraught father had taken his daughter hostage. The father was furious with the legal system and felt betrayed by the people he trusted. The FBI team used empathy and active listening rather than arguing with the man or demanding compliance. They summarized his feelings, his frustration, his sense of betrayal, and his fear of losing his daughter. After a particularly empathetic and accurate summary, the father responded, "That's right." That moment shifted everything. His aggression softened, and within a short time, he surrendered peacefully. The case underscored a vital lesson. "That's right" can diffuse even the most volatile situations. Psychological principles at play. Several psychological dynamics help explain why "that's right" is so powerful. Autonomy. People crave the freedom to make their own decisions. "That's right" affirms that they've concluded independently. Recognition. People want to be seen and heard. Feeling recognized can be more important than winning. Safety. Emotional safety fosters cooperation. "That's right" moments create a zone of trust. Mirror neurons. When people feel empathy, their brain's mirror neurons activate, creating a sense of connection. By tapping into these dynamics, "that's right" becomes a gateway to collaboration. "That's right" versus "you're right." The marriage example. Voss uses a typical marital example to illustrate the difference. When a spouse says, "you're right," it often means they're giving in to avoid more conflict. It's a survival response, not an agreement. However, if one spouse reflects the other's feelings and accurately describes their emotional state, the response might be, "That's right." That moment of validation can resolve long-standing tension, not just postpone it. The lesson: strive for empathy over persuasion in personal and professional relationships. Tactical steps to elicit "that's right" 1. Listen actively. Listen to words, tone, emotion, and context. 2. Use mirroring. Repeat the last few words or reframe their language to show understanding. 3. Label their emotions. Use neutral, empathetic labels to reflect their feelings. 4. Summarize their story. Condense their narrative to show complete comprehension. 5. Watch for the moment. Don't push for agreement. Let "that's right" emerge naturally. How to practice "that's right" techniques. You can develop this skill with daily practice. Try these exercises. In meetings, summarize a colleague's point until they say, "that's right." During tough conversations, reflect the other person's emotional position. In emails or proposals, reframe issues from the recipient's perspective. Voss suggests you pay attention to your conversations too. If people often say, "you're right," but rarely, "that's right," you may need to deepen your listening and empathy. Dealing with difficult people. The "that's right" technique is especially potent with difficult or combative individuals. Often, these people feel unseen or disrespected. The more you try to win, the more resistance you encounter. But when you pause, reflect their pain, show understanding without judgment, their hostility often melts away. "That's right" becomes the turning point that turns them from opponents to partners. Corporate example: negotiating with authority. In a business setting, Voss recalls negotiating with a company that refused to pay a consultant's full fee. The consultant used empathy, labeling, and summarizing to reflect the client's concerns, budget issues, past frustrations with vendors, and pressure from higher-ups. Eventually, the client said, "That's right." That moment led to a new proposal that met both parties' needs and deepened their working relationship. The lesson: understanding trumps logic. Connection drives results. The ethics of empathy. Voss also makes it clear these techniques are not about manipulation. Tactical empathy in the pursuit of "that's right" must come from a genuine place of care and respect. If you use these tools dishonestly, they'll backfire. People are intuitive. They sense when empathy is fake. But when your motives are pure, "that's right" becomes a door to long-term trust and success. Recap. Key takeaways from Chapter 5. "You're right" is often a dismissal, not agreement. "That's right" signals accurate emotional alignment and understanding. Empathy, not persuasion, is the key to breakthrough conversations. Summarizing someone's perspective is the fastest route to "that's right." These tools work in business, hostage situations, and personal life. Authenticity is essential. Empathy must be real to be effective. Conclusion: make "that's right." Your goal. Chapter 5 challenges readers to stop chasing verbal confirmation and start chasing emotional clarity. The simple shift from "you're right" to "that's right" transforms negotiations by centering the other person's experience. In every negotiation, your goal is not just to be understood, to make the other person feel you know them. When you hit that emotional bullseye and they respond with "that's right," you've unlocked the most potent moment in the negotiation. Mastering this skill takes time and practice, but once you do, you'll find that people become more open, honest, and willing to work with you, whether you're negotiating for a contract, a raise, a sale, or peace in a high-stakes standoff. "That's right" isn't just a phrase. It's the sound of trust being born. Chapter 6. Bend Their Reality. How to Shape What is Fair. In Chapter 6 of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss dives deep into the concept of fairness and how negotiators can manipulate perceptions of fairness to gain an advantage. This chapter emphasizes that fairness is not a fixed principle, but a fluid, subjective concept that can be shaped and leveraged during negotiations. Voss explains that when people perceive a deal as fair, they are more likely to agree to terms, even if they are not the most beneficial. The psychology of fairness. Humans are wired to crave fairness, and this deep-seated need often governs decision-making. According to Voss, when people feel they are being mistreated, their emotional responses can be intense and lead to negotiation resistance. Emotions like anger, frustration, and even betrayal can surface if someone feels that the terms of an agreement are lopsided. For this reason, fairness is an emotional trigger in negotiations that can be one of the most potent tools a negotiator has when understood and handled correctly. However, fairness does not exist in a vacuum. What is considered fair to one person may not be fair to another. Voss asserts that fairness is a psychological construct influenced by emotions, personal experiences, and expectations. Negotiators must be acutely aware of these factors and learn to manipulate the perception of fairness to achieve their desired outcome. The power of the word fair. One of the simplest but most effective strategies that Voss discusses in this chapter is using the word fair itself. The word fair has an emotional weight that can be used to influence the negotiation. When someone says, "I want this to be fair," they are voicing an emotional need to feel they are not being taken advantage of. Voss highlights that using the word fair can be a powerful tool to reframe a situation and establish the perception that a deal is balanced. For instance, if a negotiator offers a lower price or less favorable terms, they might say, "This is a fair price given the market conditions." By framing their offer as fair, the negotiator is signaling that they are considering the other party's needs and are offering a reasonable deal. The perception of fairness can cause the other party to feel more comfortable with the offer, even if it is not their ideal outcome. Additionally, the word fair can be used to defend against unfair accusations. If a negotiator is confronted with objections, they can use the word fair to reassure the other party. For example, saying, "I want to make sure this deal is fair to both of us," can help diffuse tension and refocus the conversation on equity rather than on perceived inequalities. The Rule of Three, creating fairness through multiple options. Voss introduces the Rule of Three as another key tactic for creating negotiation fairness. This strategy involves presenting the other party with three different options, all of which are framed as fair, to give them the illusion of control. The idea behind the Rule of Three is to create a range of choices that all point toward the same outcome, but give the other party the belief that they are making the decision. For example, in a sales negotiation, instead of offering a single price, you might present three options. 1. High-end option with premium services at a higher price. Second, standard option with a reasonable price and basic services. Third, budget option with the lowest price and minimal services. In this case, all three options are structured to favor the seller, but the buyer perceives that they are in control and can choose the best option for them. This approach works because people feel more comfortable believing they have choices, even if those choices are carefully structured to lead them toward the desired outcome. The Rule of Three is a psychological manipulation technique that reduces resistance by making the negotiation more collaborative and open. The other party believes they have the freedom to choose, but all options have been carefully crafted to steer them toward your desired outcome. Framing the deal as fair from the start. Another critical strategy discussed in this chapter is framing the negotiation as fair. By preemptively stating that your offer is fair, you set the tone for the conversation and make it more difficult for the other party to argue that the terms are unfair. For example, you might say, "I believe this offer is fair given the circumstances," or "This proposal is designed to be fair for both sides." This approach works because it immediately frames the conversation in a way that sets expectations. If your terms are introduced with the language of fairness, the other party may be more inclined to view them as reasonable. This tactic helps avoid the emotional reactions that can arise when fairness is questioned or perceived as lacking. Overcoming resistance with fairness. When a negotiator encounters resistance, mainly because the other party perceives the deal as unfair, Voss advises acknowledging the perceived unfairness and validating the other party's emotions. This can be done through labeling and mirroring, two techniques that help reduce defensiveness and build rapport. For example, if the other party expresses frustration over the terms, you might say, "It seems like you're concerned about how fair this is," or "It sounds like you feel the terms aren't balanced." Labeling and mirroring help to diffuse negative emotions and show empathy, making the other party feel heard. Once their concerns are validated, they are more likely to engage in problem-solving mode and be more receptive to proposals that address their perceived unfairness. Voss emphasizes that these techniques should be used strategically to acknowledge concerns and reframe the situation as an opportunity for collaboration. When the other party feels that their emotional needs are being recognized, they are more likely to approach the negotiation with trust and openness, increasing the chances of reaching a favorable agreement. Case study: a corporate negotiation. To illustrate the power of fairness in high-stakes negotiations, Voss recounts a case study involving a CEO negotiating a business deal. The client demanded a lower price, but the company had already offered a competitive rate. Voss helped the CEO frame the proposal as fair by emphasizing the mutual benefits of the deal and using the rule of three to give the client multiple options, all of which pointed toward a favorable outcome for the company. By framing the offer as fair and presenting multiple options, the CEO diffused the client's concerns and steered the conversation toward a mutually agreeable deal. This case study highlights the effectiveness of using fairness to overcome resistance and secure a favorable outcome, even when the other party initially feels that the terms are unfair. Applying fairness in personal negotiations. Voss also applies the concept of fairness to personal negotiations, such as family disputes or interpersonal conflicts. In these situations, the perception of fairness can be as important as in business or high-stakes talks. By acknowledging the emotions involved and framing the resolution as fair, negotiators can avoid escalating conflict and encourage collaboration. For example, in a personal situation where one party feels wronged, a negotiator might say, "I understand why you feel this isn't fair, and I want to find a solution that works for both of us." By acknowledging the other person's emotional need for fairness and showing a willingness to collaborate, the negotiator sets the stage for a favorable resolution. Key takeaways from Chapter 6. Fairness is subjective. It is influenced by emotions, experiences, and personal values. The word fair is powerful. It can reframe situations and establish a perception of balance and equity. The rule of three: by offering multiple options, you give the other party the illusion of control while subtly guiding them toward the most beneficial option for you. Preemptive framing. Introducing the idea of fairness early in the negotiation sets the tone and reduces resistance. Labeling and mirroring. Acknowledge concerns about fairness to build rapport and reduce defensiveness. Chapter 6 of Never Split the Difference underscores the importance of understanding and manipulating fairness in negotiations. By framing deals fairly and using strategies like the rule of three, negotiators can bend the other party's perception of reality and create a more favorable outcome. Whether in business, high-stakes negotiations, or personal situations, the power of fairness is a tool that every negotiator should understand and leverage to their advantage. Chapter 7. Create the illusion of control. How to calibrate questions to transform conflict into collaboration. In Chapter 7, Chris Voss introduces the power of calibrated questions and how they can establish control in negotiations without exerting overt authority. The fundamental concept in this chapter is that by carefully crafting questions, a negotiator can shift the dynamics of the conversation, allowing the counterpart to feel in control while subtly guiding the interaction toward a positive outcome for the negotiator. Through this process, Voss explores how specific questions can help transform conflict into collaboration and how they can be tailored to make the other party feel heard and involved in problem solving without ever engaging in power struggles. The key idea behind this chapter is rooted in the psychological principle of the illusion of control. In negotiations, when the other party feels they have control over the outcome, they are likelier to engage cooperatively and work toward a solution. However, as Voss points out, the key is that this control is an illusion. The negotiator can still direct the conversation by crafting questions that encourage the other party to solve the problems themselves while subtly shaping the conversation to benefit the negotiator's interests. The importance of questions in negotiation. At the heart of Voss's strategy is the notion that questions are more powerful than statements in a negotiation. Traditional negotiation tactics often involve making demands, offering ultimatums, or using other assertive forms of communication. However, these methods typically lead to resistance. People tend to react negatively when they feel coerced or threatened. Instead of making demands, Voss suggests that negotiators should aim to ask the right questions, open-ended questions that force the other party to think, justify their position, and ultimately steer the conversation toward the desired outcome. Voss uses the term calibrated question to describe these questions. These questions are not direct or confrontational, but carefully designed to prompt problem solving from the other party. By posing these questions, the negotiator can engage the other party in ways that reveal their priorities, uncover hidden motivations, and gradually push the conversation in the right direction. Voss's approach challenges the traditional view that negotiating success comes from commanding and controlling the situation. Instead, he proposes that negotiators can use calibrated questions to engage the other party's intellect and emotions without triggering defensiveness. When done correctly, this can create a collaborative atmosphere rather than one of conflict or competition. The 3 types of calibrated questions. Voss identifies 3 primary types of calibrated questions that negotiators can use, each designed for different circumstances, but all aimed at creating cooperation. The following are the 3 categories of calibrated questions that Voss recommends using in negotiations. 1. How questions. The first type of calibrated question is the how question, which is used to get the other party to explain their reasoning or outline their strategy. These questions are non-confrontational, but force the other person to think critically about their position, helping to expose any weaknesses or gaps in their argument. A simple example of a how question would be, how am I supposed to do that? This question burdens the other party to justify why they are asking for something that might be unreasonable or difficult to deliver. Rather than directly refusing their request, the negotiator uses the question to make the other party feel the weight of their demands. It forces them to devise a solution or reframe their expectations while appearing as though the negotiator is simply asking for clarification. Another example could be, how would you like me to address this problem? This type of question encourages the other party to devise a solution and allows the negotiator to gauge their priorities and willingness to compromise. 2. What questions. The second category of calibrated questions is the what question. These questions are often used to probe for more detailed information or shift the conversation's focus to the other party's needs rather than focusing on the negotiator's position. When framed properly, what questions encourage the other party to provide specific answers that reveal their true priorities, motivations, and potential areas of flexibility. For example, a negotiator might ask, what factors are most important to you in this deal? This question invites the counterpart to openly discuss their needs, which can be invaluable in understanding what they value most. Once these priorities are revealed, the negotiator can find ways to align their goals with the other party's objectives. Similarly, a question like, what would it take for you to say yes to this, can help clarify the conditions under which the other party might be willing to make a deal. By asking what questions, the negotiator gains insight into what the other party is willing to compromise and what they consider non-negotiable. 3. How am I supposed to do that? The third type of calibrated question that Voss introduces challenges unreasonable demands or positions. How am I supposed to do that? This question is a way to deflect pressure and put the responsibility on the other party to justify their requests. Instead of simply saying no to a demand, the negotiator responds with this question, forcing the other party to explain why their request is feasible and how the negotiator can meet it. This question is beneficial when the other party is making an unreasonable or difficult demand. For instance, if someone demands an unreasonably low price instead of rejecting the offer outright, the negotiator would ask, "How am I supposed to do that?" This not only places the burden of justification on the other party, but also opens up the conversation for negotiation on more mutually acceptable terms. The psychological dynamics of calibrated questions. One of the core principles behind calibrated questions is their psychological impact on the other party. People generally resist being told what to do. When they feel cornered or threatened, they often become defensive, and negotiations can break down. However, by asking calibrated questions, the negotiator shifts the responsibility to the other party, thus allowing them to retain a sense of control. Calibrated questions are also practical because they avoid confrontation. Confrontational language, such as making demands or issuing ultimatums, can lead to adverse reactions. People are naturally inclined to resist forceful tactics, especially in high-stakes situations. However, when negotiators ask open-ended, calibrated questions, they avoid triggering the other party's fight-or-flight response. Instead, they invite the other party into a problem-solving mode, where both sides can dialogue to find mutually beneficial solutions. Moreover, Voss emphasizes the role of active listening in this process. When negotiators listen carefully to the answers to their calibrated questions, they gain valuable information that can be used to steer the conversation toward a resolution. This active listening helps build rapport and trust, essential elements of successful negotiations. The role of no in calibrated questions. Voss also ties in the concept of no from earlier chapters. In previous chapters, he explained that no is not always a rejection, but rather an opportunity to clarify terms and conditions. In this chapter, he describes how calibrated questions often lead to a no response, but this should not be seen as a setback. Instead, no opens up a space for further discussion and negotiation. For example, when a negotiator asks, "Would you be willing to lower the price?" the other party might respond with no. However, this no provides clarity, allowing the negotiator to probe further with questions like, "What would it take for you to lower the price?" This dialogue leads to a deeper understanding of the other party's position and makes it possible to find common ground. Using calibrated questions to diffuse tension. Voss also highlights how calibrated questions can diffuse tension in heated negotiations. When emotions run high, people often react impulsively and defensively. By posing carefully calibrated questions, negotiators can guide the conversation to a more reasoned and cooperative tone. A question like, "What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?" helps the other party refocus on the issue rather than continuing to escalate the conflict. By using questions that refocus the conversation, negotiators can reduce hostility and keep the conversation productive. This is particularly important in high-pressure situations, where both parties may feel that their positions are at risk. Calibrated questions allow exploring options and identifying win-win solutions, even in high-stakes negotiations. Chapter 7 of Never Split. The Difference teaches negotiators how to create the illusion of control through the use of calibrated questions. By asking open-ended questions that force the other party to think critically and take responsibility for their position, negotiators can transform confrontational situations into collaborative problem-solving processes. This approach helps negotiators achieve better outcomes and creates a more positive and cooperative atmosphere in which both parties feel heard, respected, and valued. Chapter 8. Guarantee Execution: How to Spot the Liars and Ensure Follow-Through from Everyone Else. In Chapter 8, Chris Voss discusses one of the most critical aspects of successful negotiation: ensuring that agreements made during the negotiation process are actually followed through. After all, achieving a favorable agreement is only half the battle. The real challenge lies in guaranteeing execution and ensuring both parties uphold their commitments. This chapter provides tools and strategies to spot potential liars, understand the psychological dynamics, and create an environment where follow-through is possible and likely. The chapter starts by stressing the importance of execution in the negotiation process. It's one thing to negotiate an agreement, but it's another to ensure that the terms are adhered to once the conversation ends. Voss argues that many negotiations fail not because of poor deals, but because the execution falls through. Whether it's a business agreement, personal contract, or even a simple verbal commitment, ensuring promises are kept is essential to negotiation success. Guaranteeing execution means setting up structures, communication patterns, and psychological triggers that compel the other party to follow through on their agreement. This process goes beyond just creating a written contract or shaking hands. It involves a deeper understanding of human behavior, trust building, and securing mutual responsibility in a psychologically motivating way for all parties involved. Voss introduces the concept of tactical empathy, a term he's used in earlier chapters, as a powerful tool for detecting dishonesty. By understanding the motivations and emotions of the other party, negotiators can identify inconsistencies in their words and actions. He outlines some key psychological signs of deception that can help negotiators spot when someone is not being truthful. For instance, subtle signs such as inconsistent body language, a failure to make eye contact, or the inability to provide coherent answers to simple questions may indicate that someone is lying or hiding something. In addition to these signs, Voss discusses the importance of calibrating questions to unearth the truth. By asking open-ended questions that require detailed explanations, negotiators can force liars to reveal contradictions in their stories. A liar may struggle to maintain consistency in their responses when pressed, revealing their deception. Voss also highlights that it's not always the words themselves, but the lack of congruence between what someone says and their body language or tone that provides the most reliable indicators of dishonesty. The power of how and what questions. A significant tool in detecting lies is the how and what questions Voss introduces throughout the book. These questions are effective in keeping the other party engaged in the conversation and also serve a dual purpose of revealing the truth. For example, asking, "How did you arrive at that conclusion?" or "What led you to that decision?" can force the other party to provide a more detailed explanation that either aligns with their previous statements or reveals inconsistencies. When someone lies, they often struggle to provide clear, logical answers to these questions because their responses lack the foundation of truth. Implementing accountability. After establishing the groundwork for detecting dishonesty, Voss focuses on how negotiators can ensure agreement follow-through. He emphasizes the importance of accountability structures in any negotiation. Simply reaching an agreement is insufficient if there's no mechanism to ensure both parties hold up their end of the bargain. Voss discusses black swans, the unexpected or hidden factors in a negotiation that could affect the outcome. These could be anything from personal motivations to external influences that may not be immediately apparent. The key is finding these hidden factors and ensuring they are addressed in the execution plan. This ensures that nothing is overlooked and that both parties are invested in completing the agreement. One primary way to ensure accountability is by implementing deadlines. Voss argues that a clear timeline for follow-up is crucial in ensuring that both parties follow through. Without deadlines or checkpoints, there is little incentive for parties to complete their side of the agreement. In negotiations where execution is key, setting milestones or deadlines ensures the deal isn't left hanging indefinitely. For example, if one party promises to deliver a product, specifying by Thursday at 5 p.m., creates a clear time frame for execution. Additionally, Voss discusses the importance of using commitments and explicit language when finalizing agreements. Making things unambiguous at the negotiation's conclusion prevents any confusion. Negotiators should avoid vague terms like "as soon as possible" and instead opt for clear, concrete language such as "I will send the contract by 3 p.m. tomorrow." This avoids any misinterpretation of the terms and ensures that there's no room for procrastination. getting the other party to feel the consequences. Voss also introduces the psychological concept of making the other party feel the consequences of non-execution. This involves creating scenarios where the other party is psychologically invested in the outcome and understands the personal repercussions of failing to follow through. He suggests creating an emotional connection by highlighting what's at stake so that the other party understands their obligations and the risks of not fulfilling their commitments. One way to do this is by exploring the potential negative consequences of not following through. Voss advises negotiators to ask, "What happens if this doesn't work out?" This type of question forces the other party to consider the fallout of non-compliance, whether it's a damaged reputation, legal repercussions, or lost business opportunities. By framing the situation in terms of consequences, negotiators incentivize the other party to fulfill their side of the agreement. Trust but verify. In this chapter, Voss also emphasizes the importance of trust but verify. While it's essential to trust that the other party will fulfill their promises, Voss encourages negotiators to remain vigilant. He suggests setting up periodic check-ins or status updates to monitor progress and ensure the agreement is executed as planned. These check-ins can be framed to maintain a collaborative tone rather than an accusatory one, such as, "How's everything progressing on your end?" This continued involvement signals to the other party that the negotiator is actively monitoring the situation, which can serve as a deterrent to those who might be tempted to back out or delay execution. These periodic check-ins should be framed as a mutual effort to ensure success and not as an imposition, helping maintain the relationship while fostering accountability. Building the commitment system. Finally, Voss talks about building a commitment system that encourages the other party to act in a way that aligns with the initial negotiation. A key element of this system is getting the other party to commit to something small and tangible that reinforces their responsibility in the process. This could be as simple as a verbal commitment or a handshake agreement that affirms their dedication to following through. This small commitment can have a psychological effect, as people feel more obligated to fulfill their promises when they publicly state their intentions. Using the strategies outlined in this chapter, negotiators can guarantee execution and minimize the likelihood of broken agreements or dishonesty. By detecting liars early, using clear and concise language, implementing deadlines, creating psychological consequences for non-execution, and maintaining a vigilant follow-up system, negotiators can increase the chances that their agreements will be successfully implemented. In Chapter 8 of Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss highlights the crucial role that execution plays in successful negotiation. He emphasizes that guaranteeing follow-through requires more than an agreement. It involves psychological tactics to detect dishonesty, create accountability systems, and ensure that both parties remain committed to the deal. Negotiators can significantly increase their chances of achieving the desired results by understanding human behavior, detecting lies, and framing agreements with precise deadlines and consequences. Chapter 9. Bargain Hard: How to Get Your Price. In Chapter 9, Chris Voss shifts the focus of his negotiation strategies to the art of bargaining hard and securing the best price. Whether you're negotiating for a product, service, or even an agreement, Voss lays out the key tactics that help negotiators get their desired price. The key takeaway is that bargaining is about leverage, psychological influence, and having the courage to push for what you want, all while maintaining control and avoiding the pitfalls of concession making. The power of a strong first offer. Voss begins the chapter by explaining one of the most fundamental rules of negotiation: make a firm first offer. Regarding price negotiations, the initial offer is critical in anchoring the conversation. The principle behind this tactic is that the first number thrown out on the table sets the psychological anchor, creating a baseline that the subsequent offers will likely revolve around. Voss stresses that this first offer should not be weak or undersold. Instead, it should be ambitious enough to give you room to maneuver during the negotiation. A powerful first offer helps shape the negotiation landscape and positions you as someone who knows their value and isn't easily swayed. Starting high leaves room to make concessions without jeopardizing your final price target. However, Voss also cautions that the first offer should remain within the bounds of reason to avoid alienating the other party, ensuring that the negotiation progresses in a productive direction. The use of silence. Another essential element in getting your price is the strategic use of silence. Voss highlights that silence can be a potent tool during bargaining. After making an offer, whether the first offer or a counteroffer, remaining silent forces the other party into an uncomfortable position where they may feel compelled to respond. Silence gives you time to assess the other person's reaction and forces them to do the work to devise a solution. Silence can also be a signal of confidence and patience. When you stay quiet, you convey that you're comfortable with your offer and not eager to rush into any deal. This can subtly pressure the other party to agree with your proposal or improve their offer to fill the silence. Tactical empathy and the power of fair. Tactical empathy, which Voss has introduced in earlier chapters, also plays a vital role in bargaining. He explains that understanding the emotions and perspectives of the other party allows you to craft offers that appeal to their interests and concerns. However, this can be particularly useful in mitigating objections and overcoming resistance in price negotiations. Voss focuses explicitly on fair as a psychological trigger in the negotiation process. People are often sensitive to fairness, and using this term strategically can help push the negotiation in your favor. For example, when you feel the other party is starting to dig in their heels or go back on your offer, using phrases like, "I just want," "Hat's fair," "What's DEL is very fair for both of us," can trigger a response where they feel obliged to meet you at the price point you desire. Fairness is so ingrained in human psychology that when someone hears that they're being mistreated, it can trigger a desire to correct the imbalance. Voss suggests that the careful application of fairness, particularly when the negotiation feels lopsided, can create pressure on the other side to make concessions. Anchoring and making the impossible offer. 1. The key tactics Voss introduces in this chapter is the idea of anchoring with an impossible offer. The goal is to introduce an offer that seems unreasonably high to make your target price seem more reasonable by comparison. This is a powerful psychological tactic, as it creates a new reference point that makes subsequent offers appear more palatable. The idea behind this is simple. When you present an offer far from what you're ultimately willing to accept, you create an anchor that influences the other party's perception of the value of your position. This tactic requires confidence and precision, because if the initial offer is too extreme or unrealistic, it could backfire and shut down the negotiation altogether. The key is ensuring the first offer is within a reasonable range and the talks remain open. In some cases, the impossible offer may be used as a tactic to walk away with the highest possible price, even if it seems extreme at the outset. By introducing such an offer, Voss suggests, you establish a position of strength, making it more difficult for the other party to counter with something that significantly undervalues your position. The accusation A and dealing with pushback. An essential element of bargaining is handling pushback or objections from the other party. Voss introduces the accusation adire, a method for addressing potential objections before they are raised. The accusation audit preemptively addresses concerns of the other party about your price, offer, or position. For example, suppose you know that the price you're asking will likely be seen as high. In that case, you might start by saying, "I know this I sound like a lot, but here's why there's sense." By acknowledging potential objections and addressing them head-on, you disarm any resistance the other party may have and position yourself as a reasonable, upfront negotiator. This technique also helps maintain control of the narrative. Instead of waiting for the other party to voice their concerns, you get ahead of the conversation and ensure you've framed your discussion on your terms. Acknowledging and diffusing objections before they arise increases your chances of keeping the negotiation on track and in your favor. Bargaining as a series of concessions. Voss also explains that bargaining is often a series of concessions and counteroffers. It's not about making one hard offer and expecting it to be accepted immediately. Instead, it's about the negotiation toward your desired outcome through gradual adjustments. Each concession you make should be framed strategically, ensuring that the other party perceives each one as valuable. For example, if you're negotiating a price, your first offer might be significantly higher than your target. If the other party pushes back, you can make a calculated concession, lowering the price slightly. But you should clarify that this concession is significant. By signaling that you've already promised, you encourage the other party to reciprocate with their own concession. Each side in the negotiation should feel like they've gained something to maintain momentum. One of the key strategies Voss discusses is splitting the difference, a tactic where both parties meet halfway between their positions. However, Voss warns against relying on this tactic too heavily, as it can sometimes result in mediocre outcomes that don't serve either party's true interests. Instead, Voss suggests that creative problem-solving and exploring alternatives often lead to better deals. Creating leverage with time pressure. Lastly, Voss talks about the psychological impact of time pressure in negotiations. Time can be one of the most effective levers in bargaining. By creating urgency or setting deadlines, negotiators can accelerate the process and push the other party to act quickly. However, this needs to be used wisely, as trying too hard or too quickly can result in the other party feeling rushed and making impulsive decisions that aren't in their best interest. Time pressure can also help avoid prolonged negotiations that ultimately don't yield results. Setting a deadline or indicating that you're ready to walk away can help move the process forward, encouraging the other side to make a final decision. However, using this tactic in conjunction with the other techniques discussed in the chapter, you can ensure that you maintain control while still creating a sense of urgency. Conclusion. In Chapter 9, Voss provides a comprehensive guide to bargaining hard and securing the best price in a negotiation. He emphasizes the importance of making a firm first offer, using silence strategically, anchoring offers to influence perception, and applying psychological principles like fairness to gain leverage. Voss also introduces tools like the accusation audit to handle objections and the concept of gradual concessions to keep negotiations moving forward. Ultimately, the chapter reinforces the idea that successful price negotiation requires a combination of confidence, strategy, and psychological insight. Negotiators can use these tactics to secure the best price and achieve favorable outcomes in various negotiation scenarios. Chapter 10. Find the Black Swan. How to create breakthroughs by revealing the unknown. Unknowns. In Chapter 10, Chris Voss introduces the concept of black swans, which are the unknown unknowns, the hidden pieces of information that, if discovered, can drastically change the course of a negotiation. These pieces of information are often overlooked or remain hidden by the parties involved, yet they hold the potential to unlock breakthroughs that lead to much more favorable outcomes. The chapter focuses on how the discovery of these black swans can dramatically shift power dynamics and resolve seemingly insurmountable issues in negotiations. The concept of black swans. The term black swan comes from the metaphor coined by philosopher and statistician Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which refers to an event or piece of information that is rare, surprising, and has a significant impact once revealed. In negotiations, a black swan is an unknown or hidden truth that can suddenly shift the balance in your favor or provide critical leverage you didn't anticipate. Voss makes it clear that in any negotiation, there are pieces of critical information that, if discovered, would completely alter the course of events. However, the other party often hides these black swans, either purposefully or inadvertently. It's up to the negotiator to actively search for these unknowns, which usually requires patience, intuition, and a deep understanding of human behavior. Voss explains that the key to successful negotiations lies not only in dealing with known facts, but also in uncovering hidden realities that the other party may not be revealing. Once discovered, these unknowns provide a game-changing opportunity to reshape the terms of the negotiation to your advantage. How to search for black swans. Finding a black swan is not about relying on guesswork or intuition alone. It involves a combination of strategic questioning, observation, and a deep understanding of the human element in negotiation. Voss stresses that negotiators must be active listeners, constantly observing verbal and nonverbal cues, and ask the right questions to encourage the other party to reveal critical information. Voss outlines several ways to uncover black swans. 1. Ask calibrated questions. One of the most effective ways to uncover hidden information is by asking calibrated questions, which are open-ended questions that prompt the other party to think and provide more insight into their perspective. These questions force the counterpart to explain their reasoning, reveal hidden concerns, or provide details they may not have intended to share. Examples of calibrated questions include, how am I supposed to do that? What's the reason behind that decision? Why is this important to you? These questions don't directly challenge the other party. Instead, they encourage them to open up and reveal more about their motivations, preferences, or concerns. 2. Leverage the power of empathy. Voss emphasizes the importance of tactical empathy, understanding the other party's feelings and perspectives. By empathizing with their position, you can create an environment where the other party feels safe and understood, making it more likely that they will reveal information they might otherwise withhold. 3. Pay attention to emotional cues. In many cases, black swans are revealed through emotional responses. People often react emotionally to specific topics, situations, or questions. Observing these emotional cues allows you to identify areas of sensitivity or vulnerability that may point to hidden factors affecting the negotiation. Use labeling. Labeling is another technique discussed by Voss in previous chapters. When you identify an emotional cue or a potential area of concern, you can use labeling to draw attention to it and encourage the other party to elaborate. For example, saying, "It seems like you're concerned about X," can open up the conversation and prompt them to share more about their underlying concerns. 5. Look for inconsistencies. Voss advises negotiators to pay close attention to any inconsistencies in the other party's statements or behavior. Inconsistencies often signal that something is being hidden or withheld. When you notice discrepancies between what someone says and what they do, it may be a sign that an undisclosed black swan is lurking beneath the surface. Examples of black swans in real-life negotiations. Voss shares several real-life stories to illustrate how black swans can dramatically change the outcome of negotiations. One example involves a negotiation between the FBI and a bank robber. During the talks, the robber was adamant about his demands. However, the negotiators soon discovered that the robber's true concern was not the money, but his fear of going back to prison for life. By understanding this hidden fear, his black swan, the negotiators were able to craft an approach that de-escalated the situation and led to a peaceful resolution. Another example involves the negotiation between a corporate executive and a potential buyer. The executive was hesitant to sell his company. Still, through skilled questioning and observation, the buyer was able to uncover that the executive had an emotional attachment to a specific aspect of the company, which the buyer could use as leverage to negotiate a better price. These examples demonstrate how black swans are often hidden in the emotions and psychological factors that underlie a negotiation. Once the hidden truths are revealed, the entire negotiation can be transformed. Why black swans matter. Black swans are important because they have the potential to create breakthroughs in negotiations. By identifying the unknowns, a negotiator can unlock new possibilities that would otherwise remain hidden. These revelations can help a negotiator move from a position of weakness to one of strength or help shift the dynamics in a way that favors both parties. The value of a black swan lies not just in its discovery, but in the way it reshapes the conversation. Once a key piece of information is uncovered, the negotiator can use it to create new solutions, redefine the terms of the deal, and find opportunities that weren't visible before. This shift often leads to outcomes that are far better than those initially envisioned, and the negotiator who can reveal these hidden truths is in a position to achieve extraordinary results. Voss warns that black swans are often ignored because negotiators are so focused on the facts and terms that are immediately visible. As a result, they miss the opportunity to unearth the hidden truths that could fundamentally change the direction of the negotiation. This is why Voss emphasizes the importance of staying curious, asking the right questions, and paying attention to the emotional cues that might indicate the presence of black swans. Applying black swan thinking to everyday negotiations. While black swans are often associated with high-stakes negotiations, such as hostage situations or corporate deals, V argues that this mindset can be applied to everyday talks as well. Whether negotiating a salary, a business deal, or even personal matters, hidden factors and emotional undercurrents can always be leveraged to achieve a better outcome. For example, in a salary negotiation, the employer might not openly admit to budget constraints or the importance of keeping salary offers within a certain range. By asking calibrated questions and using tactical empathy, a negotiator can uncover these hidden constraints and adjust their approach accordingly. Similarly, in a business deal, the buyer and seller might each be holding back key information about their priorities. Still, by engaging in careful listening and questioning, a negotiator can uncover these black swans and use them to reach a more favorable agreement. Conclusion. In Chapter 10, Voss introduces the concept of black swans, hidden, game-changing pieces of information that have the power to alter the course of a negotiation dramatically. By searching for these unknown unknowns, negotiators can uncover breakthroughs that lead to more favorable outcomes. The key to finding black swans is through active listening, strategic questioning, and observing emotional cues. Voss encourages negotiators to stay curious, empathetic, and vigilant in order to uncover these hidden truths and use them to their advantage. This chapter underscores the idea that negotiations are rarely about straightforward transactions. Instead, they are about uncovering hidden truths, leveraging emotional dynamics, and finding creative ways to solve problems that benefit everyone involved. Black swans are the keys to unlocking these breakthroughs, and negotiators who are skilled at finding them will have a significant advantage in achieving the outcomes they desire. Overall, conclusion of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is a groundbreaking book that revolutionizes the way we approach negotiation. Drawing from his vast experience as an FBI hostage negotiator, Voss provides a detailed, practical framework for navigating the most complex and high-stakes negotiations. Still, he also emphasizes that these techniques are applicable in everyday scenarios, whether in business, personal relationships, or even casual interactions. The overall conclusion of the book is that negotiation is not simply about reaching a middle ground or splitting the difference. Traditional negotiation advice often suggests that compromising or finding a win-win solution is the goal, but Voss argues that this is usually a flawed approach. Instead, he emphasizes that successful negotiation is about gaining leverage, understanding human psychology, and using strategic tactics to steer the conversation in your favor. The key to effective negotiation lies in creating mutual trust, rapport, and tactical empathy, and in uncovering the hidden factors, what Voss calls black swans, that can lead to breakthrough outcomes. Key takeaways from the book. 1. Embrace tactical empathy. Voss stresses the importance of understanding and acknowledging the other party's emotions, thoughts, and motivations. By actively listening, labeling emotions, and reflecting on the counterpart's perspective, negotiators can build trust and create a safe environment for communication. Tactical empathy helps negotiators gain insights into the hidden drivers behind the other party's decisions. 2. Master the art of silence. The use of silence is a powerful tool in negotiations. By strategically pausing, negotiators can create tension, force the other party to speak, and often reveal crucial information. Silence allows the negotiator to gain control of the conversation and forces the other side to reveal their hand. 3. The power of no. Voss stresses that no is not the end of a negotiation. It is often the beginning of true progress. By getting the other party to say no, negotiators can create a sense of security and allow the conversation to move forward. Saying no provides the opportunity to redefine the terms and gain more control over the process. 4th, questioning as a strategic tool. Calibrated questions, which are open-ended questions that force the other party to think and provide more detailed responses, are a cornerstone of Voss's strategy. These questions help uncover information that the other party may not be willing to share directly and steer the negotiation toward a favorable outcome. 5. Finding black swans. One of the book's most significant contributions is the concept of black swans, the hidden, unknown pieces of information that can change the course of a negotiation. Voss explains that successful negotiators are constantly on the lookout for these unknowns and use them to their advantage. By uncovering black swans, negotiators can find new opportunities and create solutions that would not have been apparent otherwise. 6. The illusion of control. Creating the illusion of control is another critical technique in Voss's toolkit. By calibrating your questions and allowing the other party to feel that they are driving the negotiation, you can subtly guide the conversation in a direction that benefits you. This technique encourages collaboration rather than confrontation, leading to better outcomes for both parties. 7. Bending. Reality. Negotiators can bend the other party's perception of fairness by introducing new facts, framing the negotiation in different ways, and using techniques like anchoring. By shaping the narrative, a negotiator can guide the other party to see a deal as favorable, even if it initially seemed out of reach. 8. Bargaining hard and guaranteeing execution. The final chapters of the book focus on how to bargain effectively by understanding the real stakes of the negotiation and pushing for the best possible deal. Voss also emphasizes the importance of ensuring follow-through, recognizing signs of deception, and ensuring that commitments made during the negotiation process are executed. The shift in negotiation paradigm. What makes Never Split the Difference so unique is its rejection of traditional negotiation strategies. Many conventional techniques revolve around compromise, finding the middle ground, and working toward a mutual agreement. However, Voss's approach focuses on aggressively pushing for your interests while using psychological tactics to influence the other party. He advocates for a more strategic, human-centered approach that places less emphasis on the deal's fairness and more on gaining tactical leverage. The idea is to use psychological influence and emotional intelligence to build relationships that allow both sides to arrive at a solution that satisfies their hidden needs. For Voss, negotiation is not about getting the other party to settle for less. It's about using the conversation to discover hidden motivations and leverage emotions and tactics to achieve a better outcome. Conclusion: the power of human behavior in negotiation. Throughout the book, Voss continually underscores that negotiation is a human-driven process. It is about understanding behavior, psychology, and emotions, both your own and the other parties. While traditional negotiation strategies focus on rational arguments and win-win outcomes, Voss's methods are rooted in empathy, tactical questioning, and emotional engagement. The book's final message is one of empowerment. Negotiation is not a battle of egos, but rather a collaborative process where both parties seek to understand each other's needs and navigate complex emotional landscapes. The negotiator who understands the human element of negotiation, who can influence emotions, uncover hidden truths, and remain calm under pressure, has a distinct advantage in any negotiation. Never Split the Difference offers powerful tools and techniques that can be applied to virtually any negotiation. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, resolving conflicts in personal relationships, or even trying to convince someone to see your point of view, the skills and strategies outlined in this book can provide the edge you need to succeed. By using these tools, you won't simply split the difference or accept a compromise solution. You'll uncover the hidden factors that allow you to drive a better outcome and gain a greater understanding of the people you're negotiating with. Through the power of empathy, tactical questioning, and emotional intelligence, you'll be able to navigate even the most difficult negotiations with confidence and skill.